Sarah checks her phone again. 3 minutes since his last text. The cafe around her hums with ordinary Tuesday afternoon life. Laptops clicking, steam hissing from the espresso machine, conversations bleeding into white noise. But for Sarah, the world has contracted to a single, burning question. Why hasn't he responded? She types another message, deletes it, types again. Her thumb hovers over send, but watch closer. Sarah isn't sitting in that cafe anymore. She's standing in a vast, crimson-lit amphitheater where desire has built its cruelest architecture. The air tastes of copper and anticipation. Here, lovers don't exchange glances, they trade pieces of their souls at auction blocks draped in silk. Sarah approaches the central platform, where a golden guillotine gleams under spotlight. But this isn't an instrument of death. It's a machine of transformation. The blade doesn't fall. It rises, and with each ascent, it carves away another fragment of dignity, another sliver of self-possession. Around the amphitheater's edge, other figures move like sleepwalkers. A woman, in a tattered evening gown, feeds love letters into a furnace that burns cold, each page making the flames hungrier. A man builds a tower of his own photographs, each image showing him smaller, more desperate, until at the top, he's barely visible, a speck of need reaching toward an empty sky. The guillotine's blade catches the light as Sarah places her neck upon its rest, but she's not the victim here, she's the executioner. Each unanswered text is another pull of the rope, each desperate call another inch of the blade's descent. The cruelest truth echoes through the amphitheater. She's not being destroyed by his indifference. She's destroying herself with her own desire. The crowd that watches from the stone seats wears familiar faces. Her mother nodding with sad recognition. Her best friend who warned her months ago. Her own reflection in a cracked mirror propped against the amphitheater's wall. They're all witnesses to the same ancient ritual. Sarah raises the blade again. And this time, as it begins its descent, she sees the truth carved into its metal surface. The one who loves less controls more. The blade stops just short of her throat, suspended by the thin thread of her own realization. In the sudden silence, she hears what Schopenhauer whispered centuries ago, that desire is the root of all suffering, and we suffer most exquisitely when we make gods of those who refuse to worship us in return. This is what psychology calls anxious attachment. Coined by John Bowlby in the 1960s, it describes the desperate dance of those who learned early that love must be earned through performance and panic. It manifests in the woman who checks her partner's location obsessively, in the man who apologizes for feelings he's entitled to have, in the countless souls who mistake intensity for intimacy and desperation for devotion. Schopenhauer would call this a particularly vicious trick of the will, that blind driving force that keeps us reaching, grasping, suffering. The will convinces us that possession equals peace, that if we could just hold tightly enough, love would finally stop hurting. But the tighter we grasp, the more we strangle the very thing we claim to cherish. The ancients called it the curse of Tantalus. Today, psychology names it anxious attachment. What does your guillotine look like? What do you place on the block? Your dignity, your peace, or your sense of self? Listen closely. The blade you think will free you is the same one keeping you imprisoned. The executioner you fear has always been you. A woman stands before a mirror, trying on faces like masks, but each reflection shows someone else entirely, and she's forgotten which one was ever truly hers. Marcus straightens his tie in the bathroom mirror before the office party. He practices his laugh, the one that got him promoted last year. Not the snorting, genuine one that emerges when his daughter tells him jokes, but the measured, professional chuckle that signals he gets the joke without being too amused. He checks his teeth, adjusts his smile to exactly 30% enthusiasm, and walks toward the conference room where he'll spend the next 2 hours being the person everyone expects him to be, but step through that mirror with him into the vast theater of borrowed faces. The walls stretch impossibly high, lined with countless masks floating in glass cases. Each mask glows with its own inner light, some golden with approval, others silver with sophistication, many black with the weight of others' expectations. The theater's stage rotates slowly, featuring different scenes: a dinner party where everyone speaks in measured tones, a boardroom where power poses are more important than actual power, a family gathering where happiness must be performed even when joy has long since died. Marcus moves through this theater like a seasoned actor between roles. At center stage, a massive mirror reflects not his face, but a kaleidoscope of all the faces he's ever worn. The devoted son, eyes bright with filial duty, but hollow with resentment. The successful executive, jaw set with determination, but fists clenched with imposter syndrome. The perfect husband, smile warm but strained, like plastic left too long in sunlight. Around him, other performers practice their own transformations. A woman rehearses concern she doesn't feel for friends she doesn't like. A teenager practices confidence while his hands shake with the terror of being discovered as ordinary. The theater's conductor, a figure whose own face shifts too quickly to ever truly see, raises his baton. The orchestra begins. A symphony of sighs, forced laughter, and the particular silence that follows when someone says exactly what they think others want to hear. Marcus reaches for another mask from the wall, this one labeled "Man Who Has It All Together." But as he lifts it toward his face, he catches a glimpse of something terrifying in the mirror's corner, a flash of who he might be without any mask at all. The face is unfamiliar, almost alien in its raw authenticity. The conductor's baton pauses midair. In that suspended moment, Marcus hears the terrible question that haunts every performance in this theater. If I remove all these faces, what if there's nothing underneath? The mask trembles in his hands. Around him, other performers have stopped their rehearsals, frozen in the same horrifying possibility. The theater falls silent, except for one sound, the soft weeping of a child, somewhere in the darkness, crying for a parent who stopped being real so long ago that even love has become another role to play. Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to navigate social expectations, named after the masks worn by actors in ancient Greek theater. It manifests in the employee who laughs at the boss's terrible jokes, in the parent who posts perfect family photos while screaming behind closed doors, in the friend who never admits they're struggling because their role is to be the strong one. Modern social media has turned persona crafting into an art form, curated feeds that show our highlight reels while our real selves scroll through them, feeling increasingly disconnected from our own performances. Schopenhauer would see the persona as the will's cruelest deception, convincing us that we are what others need us to be, keeping us trapped in an endless cycle of performance anxiety. The will whispers that acceptance depends on excellence in our roles, that love is conditional on never dropping our masks. But the tragedy isn't that we perform, it's that we perform for so long we forget we're acting. In myth, it was shape-shifting. In you, It's the habit you can't see, the persona. Which mask did you put on this morning? When was the last time you met yourself without costume, without script, without the exhausting choreography of being who you think you should be? The most terrifying truth: you've been wearing masks so long, you've forgotten you have a choice to take them off. A man pulls the strings of his marionette wife, not realizing that invisible hands above are pulling his. David cancels dinner plans again. Something came up at work, he tells Jennifer, though she knows, and he knows she knows, that he's choosing to stay late because coming home means confronting the growing distance between them. He likes the feeling of walking into a restaurant and having the staff remember his preferences, the way the hostess brightens when she sees him. Here, he's important. Here, his word matters. At home, Jennifer asks him to take out the trash, and somehow, that simple request feels like an assault on everything he believes himself to be. Follow him into the hall of invisible strings, where power reveals its most insidious architecture. The hall stretches endlessly in all directions, filled with figures suspended in air, their limbs attached to gossamer threads that gleam like spider silk in the amber light. David stands at a control panel, his fingers dancing across an array of delicate pulleys and levers. Before him, Jennifer moves through their kitchen, cleaning dishes, checking her phone for his texts, her movements precise and predictable. When David pulls lever 3, she calls to ask where he is. When he adjusts the tension on string 7, she apologizes for something she didn't do. But the hall holds a darker truth. Above David, barely visible in the shadows of the vaulted ceiling, another figure works an even more elaborate control system. This puppet master's strings attach not to David's limbs, but to his desires, his fears, his very sense of identity. When the shadow figure pulls the important string, David suddenly needs to work late. When it adjusts the control wire, David finds Jennifer's independence unbearable. He pulls her strings, thinking he's expressing his power, never seeing that he's simply dancing to the rhythm of his own manipulation. Around them, the hall fills with other puppet masters, each believing they're in control while being controlled. A mother who micromanages her adult son's life while being driven by her own mother's critical voice that never died. A boss who demands absolute loyalty while being terrified of his own irrelevance. A friend who gives advice constantly while being puppeted by their need to feel needed. The strings form an intricate web throughout the hall, connecting controller to controlled in patterns so complex that no one can trace where their power begins and their servitude ends. The most chilling sight in the hall isn't the marionettes below. It's the moment when a puppet master looks up and glimpses their own strings, realizes that the control they've exercised has been an illusion wrapped around their own enslavement. David's hands freeze on his controls as he catches sight of the shadow above him. For one terrible moment, he understands. He's been pulling Jennifer's strings not from strength, but from the desperate dance of his own captivity. The hall echoes with the sound of strings snapping, but whether it's liberation or simply another layer of the same trap, no one can tell. This is what psychologists call emotional manipulation, a pattern first extensively studied by George K. Simon in his work on personality disorders. It manifests in the partner who uses silent treatment as punishment, the parent who uses guilt to control adult children, the friend who threatens self-harm when they don't get their way. Modern dating culture has refined manipulation into an art form. Love bombing followed by withdrawal, breadcrumbing, gaslighting, all designed to create psychological dependence. Schopenhauer would recognize this as the will's most sophisticated trap. The will convinces us that controlling others will ease our own suffering, that if we can just arrange the world to our specifications, we'll finally find peace. But the desire to control others is itself a form of bondage. We become enslaved to maintaining our power, constantly vigilant against any threat to our dominance. The puppet master suffers as much as the marionette, just in a different key. The ancients called it tyranny. Today, psychology names it emotional manipulation. What strings are you pulling? More importantly, what strings are being pulled in you? The cruelest irony: the more you need to control others, the less control you have over yourself. The puppet master's greatest secret: they're just a puppet with a longer leash. A woman enters a shop that sells mirrors, each one promising to show her who she truly is, but every reflection looks suspiciously like someone else's opinion of her. Lisa scrolls through her Instagram comments, heart hammering with each notification. The photo, her in a sundress at the farmer's market, supposedly candid but carefully staged, has been live for 6 hours. 43 likes, 12 comments. But it's the silence from certain people that screams loudest. Why hasn't her sister liked it? What does David's lack of response mean? She analyzes the comments like ancient runes, searching for hidden meanings in heart-eye emojis and fire symbols. Gorgeous, writes someone she barely knows, but the word feels hollow, meaningless, because it's not coming from the voices that matter, the invisible jury that somehow decides her worth. Step through the screen into the mirror merchant's shop, where validation has become the cruelest commodity. The shop occupies several floors of an impossible building, each level lined with mirrors of different sizes, shapes, and purposes. The merchant, a figure whose own reflection appears differently in every mirror, moves between customers with the practiced grace of someone who's been trading in souls for centuries. The mirrors don't show you as you are, they show you as others see you, and the reflections shift and change based on invisible algorithms of approval. Lisa approaches the mirror of daily validation on the ground floor. Her reflection flickers between beautiful and hideous, confident and pathetic, depending on the morning's interactions. Did her coworker smile genuinely or politely? Did her mother's phone call sound rushed? Each subtle social cue sends ripples across her reflected image like stones thrown into still water. Around her, other customers perform their own desperate rituals. A man stares into the career success mirror, his reflection growing taller or shorter based on his boss's mood. A teenager weeps before the social acceptance mirror, watching herself fade to near transparency as her friend group's text thread continues without her. On the upper floors, the mirrors grow more sophisticated and more dangerous. The love mirror shows you only through your partner's eyes, but those eyes are having an off day, tired from work, distracted by their own insecurities. The parent mirror reflects decades of conditional approval and measured disappointment. The society mirror is the largest of all, its surface fractured into millions of tiny facets, each one showing how strangers might judge you, how institutions might evaluate you, how an increasingly connected world might find you wanting. But here's the shop's darkest secret. None of the mirrors actually reflect anything. They're screens, displaying the images the merchant knows each customer most desperately wants or fears to see. Lisa realizes this as she catches sight of a door marked "Staff Only," left slightly ajar. Through the gap, she glimpses the shop's real mirror, a simple, unadorned piece of glass leaning against the wall. It shows her exactly as she is. Not perfect, not terrible, just human. The reflection doesn't change based on others' opinions because it can't. It's simply true. The other customers haven't noticed the real mirror. They're too busy feeding coins into their chosen screens, desperate for another glimpse of themselves through others' eyes. Lisa stands frozen between the lie and the truth, understanding finally that the validation she's been seeking was never real. It was just another product being sold by someone who profits from her uncertainty. Carl Jung termed this living in the opinion of others, a concept later developed by psychologists studying external locus of control. It manifests in the professional who measures success only by others' recognition, the parent who defines their worth through their children's achievements, the person who can't make decisions without polling their social circle. Social media has weaponized this tendency, turning every moment into content, every experience into performance, every emotion into engagement metrics. Schopenhauer would see this as the will's most modern deception, convincing us that our worth exists somewhere outside ourselves, in the fickle opinions of others, who are themselves desperately seeking the same external validation. The will keeps us running on this hamster wheel of approval seeking, never allowing us to rest in our own inherent worth, always chasing the next hit of social validation that will finally prove we matter. In myth, it was the oracle's curse. In you, it's the habit you can't see, external validation addiction. Which mirror do you stare into most often? Whose opinion of you matters more than your own? The most liberating realization, the mirror that shows your true worth, has been behind you all along, the one that reflects simply what is, not what others think should be. A man spends decades building the perfect cage to protect himself from suffering, only to realize he's forgotten how to find the door. Thomas hasn't taken a real vacation in 8 years. Every time he considers it, he finds reasons. The project that can't wait, the client who might call, the competitor who might gain ground in his absence. He tells himself it's about responsibility, about being indispensable. But late at night, when the house is quiet and his wife sleeps beside him, he knows the truth he won't admit even to himself. He's terrified of stopping, terrified of the silence that might reveal how empty he feels when he's not performing competence, not solving problems, not being needed. The motion has become the meaning, and stillness feels like death. Enter the infinite construction site, where souls build their own prisons from the finest materials. Thomas stands in the center of an elaborate structure he's been building for decades. Walls of constant productivity, towers of essential importance, and bridges of indispensability that span vast chasms of potential irrelevance. The architecture is magnificent, each beam carved from his achievements, each brick mortared with his accolades. Other builders work nearby, their own structures rising into the clouded sky. A woman constructs a fortress of perfect motherhood, where every wall is inscribed with her children's schedules, their achievements, their needs that must never go unmet. A man builds a cathedral of financial security, its spires reaching toward numbers that grow ever larger but never large enough. The builders work with manic precision, adding new walls faster than they tear down old ones. They've become so skilled at construction that they've forgotten they're the architects of their own imprisonment. Thomas pauses in his work only when he notices something troubling, a small door, barely visible, hidden behind decades of additions. It's marked with a single word: enough. The door seems so small, so fragile compared to the massive walls surrounding it. Through its keyhole, he glimpses something that both terrifies and calls to him: stillness, simplicity, the possibility of being valuable simply for existing rather than for doing. But as Thomas approaches the door, his tools grow heavy in his hands. The hammers and saws that built his cage now feel like the only things that give his life weight and purpose. Around him, the other builders notice his hesitation and call out warnings. The walls aren't finished. The structure isn't secure. You can't stop now. Their voices echo his own internal chorus of productivity, achievement, and the desperate fear that he might discover he's enough exactly as he is, no additions required. The construction site reveals its cruelest irony. Every cage comes equipped with its own key, but the prisoners are too busy building to notice they're already free. The door marked "Enough" has been there all along, unlocked, waiting. But opening it requires the one thing the builders fear most: the courage to stop constructing their worth and simply exist in it. Viktor Frankl identified this as the existential vacuum, the emptiness people feel when they lose touch with their intrinsic meaning and try to fill it with endless activity. It manifests in the workaholic, who can't enjoy success because they're already chasing the next goal, the perfectionist, who can't celebrate achievements because they're flawed, the person who stays busy to avoid facing their own thoughts. Modern culture rewards this cage building, calling it ambition, drive, success, while the builders slowly suffocate behind walls of their own making. Schopenhauer would recognize this as the will's ultimate triumph, convincing us that we are what we do, that our worth must be earned fresh each day through suffering and striving. The will keeps us building, achieving, accumulating, never allowing us to rest in the simple fact of our existence. It whispers that stillness is laziness, that enough is surrender, that the door marked with contentment leads only to mediocrity. The ancients called it the labyrinth. Today, psychology names it the existential vacuum. What does your cage look like? What materials do you use to build it stronger every day? The most profound truth: the prison you've built to protect yourself from suffering has become the source of your suffering. The key to your freedom isn't hidden, it's in your hand, disguised as the hammer you use to build.